So, I want to start today with a very specific feeling, a kind of paralysis.
Okay.
It's not, the lazy, sit on the couch watching TV kind. It's when you're right on the edge of a new project, a career change, a business idea, something big, and you just stop.
The pause.
Yeah, the pause. And you tell yourself, okay, I just need one more article, or let me listen to one more podcast on this.
Research phase.
Right. And it feels so responsible, like you're doing your due diligence, but then there's this creeping feeling that you're not actually preparing anymore. You're just stuck.
And the usual diagnosis for that is, well, it's pretty harsh. Society calls it laziness or fear of hard work.
Exactly. If you wanted it bad enough, you'd just do it. But the source we're diving into today argues that diagnosis is completely wrong.
Hmm.
It's a text called The First Step Isn't Commitment. And it suggests this paralysis isn't from laziness at all. It's actually, believe it or not, a side effect of being smart.
It's such a fascinating premise. The source basically says that your hesitation is actually evidence that you get it. It's a sign you've accurately sized up the risks. But, and this is really the core of what we need to unpack, pinpoints a moment where that intelligence stops helping you and starts, well, trapping you.
That's the part that really hooked me. The idea that being smart about a decision is what's actually killing the decision. So our mission today is to dissect that exact mechanism. We're going to look at why experienced people hesitate, this concept of identity risk, and something called the hidden turning point.
And then the practical side, how to get out of what it calls thinking mode and into testing mode.
And it's not just take a leap of faith.
No, not at all. The source is very clear that leaps of faith are actually a terrible strategy. This is about redesigning the first step so that you don't need faith to begin with.
Okay, let's start there with that first big idea. The text says that people, especially as they get older or more established in a career, they don't fear the work. They don't fear effort.
No. High performers, they usually love the work. The grind is what they thrive on. What they're afraid of is making a mistake that they can't take back.
Irreversibility.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The source draws a really sharp line between laziness and a fear of irreversibility.
But hang on, is that really different? I mean, if I'm not starting the project, I'm not starting it. Does it really matter why?
Oh, it matters completely, because the solution is totally different. If you're lazy, the answer is, I don't know, motivation. But if you're afraid of an irreversible mistake, you don't need a motivational speech. You need a safety valve,
An escape hatch.
an escape hatch. The text points out that when you're young, you act fast because, frankly, you're a bit ignorant of the consequences. You don't know how bad a failure can feel.
Right. Ignorance is bliss, or at least ignorance is fast.
Precisely. But as you get more experience,
Yeah.
you collect data on how things can go wrong. You've seen projects fail. You've seen careers get sidetracked. So your hesitation is grounded in real data. It's not some character flaw. It's a risk calculation.
Which brings us to what the text calls its key idea. Intelligence extends decision time. Now, I have to push back a little on this. Usually, we think intelligence means faster processing, right? Faster pattern recognition. So why would being smarter make you slower?
Yeah, that's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Intelligence does mean faster processing, but it also allows for more complex simulation.
Simulation.
A smart, experienced person doesn't just see the opportunity. They can simulate the second, third, and fourth order consequences of that opportunity failing. They can imagine the failure modes in, like, high-definition 4K.
So they're not just reacting to the facts in front of them. They're reacting to a hypothetical catastrophe that hasn't even happened.
Exactly. It's called predictive processing. The more data you have, the better your mental models are, the more vivid your simulation of the future is. And if that simulation has a high probability of pain, you slam on the brakes. The source says this isn't overthinking, it's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do,
Kitches.
preventing you from walking off a cliff.
Okay, so the brain sees a cliff. But in today's world, launching a side project isn't a cliff. You're not going to die. So what is the brain actually protecting?
This is where it gets really interesting. The text introduces this idea of identity risk.
Identity risk. Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, let's just take two people. You got a 22-year-old right out of college and a 45-year-old, say, a senior architect.
Okay.
If the 22-year-old starts some online business and it completely fails in 3 months, what's lost? Bit of money, maybe some time. But his identity is still just a young guy figuring things out.
Right. The failure is almost part of the narrative. It's expected.
Now take the architect. She spent 20 years building this reputation for being competent, for being an expert. If she decides, I'm going to quit and open a bakery, and it fails, The cost is completely different.
It's not just financial.
It's an attack on her self-concept. She goes from being the successful expert to the foolish amateur who had a midlife crisis.
Wow. That's a brutal framing. So the hesitation is just protecting the ego.
It's protecting the story you tell yourself about who you are. The source argues that experienced people hesitate because they don't want to start something they might have to quit later. Because quitting feels like a failure of character. It feels like you broke a promise to yourself.
You don't want to be the person who couldn't cut it.
Yeah.
So instead of risking that, you stay in the research phase forever.
Forever. Because in the research phase, you're safe. You're still the smart, competent person analyzing a problem. You haven't failed yet because you haven't actually started.
This is a perfect transition to what the text calls the hidden turning point. Because, look, research is good, up to a point.
Absolutely.
But the source claims there's a specific moment where it flips.
Yes. The knowledge trap.
So how do you know when you're there? Is there, like, a sign?
The source suggests it's a feeling of diminishing returns on your learning. Think of it this way. The first book you read on a new topic, it might reduce your uncertainty by, say, 50%.
Yeah, you learn all the basics, the jargon.
The next book, maybe it reduces it by another 10%.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you're on the 10th book, and you're just reading the same ideas with different words.
You've hit a plateau.
Exactly. The text describes this state where you understand the structure of the problem. You get the risks, you have the data, but you still don't feel ready.
That's the part that kills you, that feeling of, I just don't feel ready yet.
And here's the critical insight from the source. At that stage, readiness cannot be acquired through more information. You cannot think your way into feeling ready. You have exhausted the value of preparation.
So where does readiness come from then?
It can only come from what the source calls controlled experience. And there's a line in the text that I think is the anchor for this whole argument. It says, there is a point where waiting no longer protects you. It only postpones clarity.
Postpones clarity. That's such an interesting phrase. We think waiting is what brings clarity.
Right. We think, I'll wait until I'm clear on what to do.
But that's the trap.
That is the trap. You're waiting for certainty, for a guarantee that it will work. Clarity is different. Clarity is just knowing what the work actually feels like. And you can't get that from a book. You are protecting yourself from a hypothetical failure by guaranteeing real-world stagnation.
Okay, so diagnosis is complete. We're smart, we have high identity risk, we're stuck in a knowledge trap, and we're just consuming information to soothe our anxiety. So how do we break out?
Well, the title of the piece is, The First Step Isn't Commitment. The solution is right there.
We have to redefine the first step.
Fundamentally, we have to strip the idea of commitment completely out of the action.
But isn't that just playing word games? I mean, whether I call it a test or a commitment, I'm still doing the thing. Does changing the label really work?
It's not about fooling your brain. It's about signaling safety to your amygdala. Words frame our biological response. The source offers a few shifts in language. Instead of adopting a new career, you're trying a new project. Instead of joining a community, you're just visiting. And my favorite one, instead of investing your identity, you are just learning.
Investing identity versus learning, that goes right back to the architect.
Exactly.
If she's becoming a baker, the stakes are enormous. If she's just learning about the science of bread, the stakes are basically zero.
Correct. Because if you frame it as learning, failure is actually impossible. If the bread is flat, you didn't fail as a person. You succeeded in learning one way that doesn't work.
You're just lowering the blast radius. The text actually provides a framework for this. It calls it the anatomy of a safe step.
Yes.
And it has 3 criteria. The step has to be small, reversible, and have a specific learning goal.
Right. And small is pretty obvious. Don't run a bakery, just bake one loaf. But that second one, reversible, that is the key for anyone dealing with that identity risk.
Why is reversibility the most important part?
Because it's the direct antidote to the fear of the mistake you can't undo. If the step is reversible, you haven't locked yourself in. You haven't quit your job. You haven't announced to the world, this is my new identity now.
It's a trap door. If you know you can get out, you're willing to walk in the room.
Yes. The second the brain knows there's an exit, the panic just subsides. It stops simulating that catastrophic future because the future isn't locked in. You're just running a tiny simulation in the real world.
And the third part, a specific learning goal. This goes back to what you said about success versus data.
Yes. A bad first step is, I'm going to launch a weekly newsletter.
Oh, yeah. High pressure, infinite timeline. Massive identity risk if nobody subscribes.
A safe step using the framework would be something like, I am going to write 3 drafts of a newsletter this weekend, and I'm not going to publish them. My only goal is to find out if I actually enjoy the process of writing.
That's almost disappointingly boring.
It has to be. That's the whole point. It's reversible. You just delete the files. It's small. And the goal isn't subscribers. The goal is, do I even like doing this?
It changes the question from, am I any good at this, to, do I enjoy this?
And that one shift just releases the brake pedal.
Hmm.
You're not trying to be a hero anymore. You're just a scientist collecting a data point.
This brings us to the anxiety paradox that the source talks about. This was the section that really clicked for me. We think taking action is the stressful part. We think I'm safe over here just analyzing. Out there in the arena, that's where the stress is.
That's the common intuition, yeah. But the source argues the exact opposite. It says uncertainty creates more anxiety than reality ever could.
Because reality is what? Bounded.
Exactly. Think about a horror movie. What's the scariest part?
It's always the part where you don't see the monster, you just hear a sound from the closet.
Right. Because whatever your brain can imagine in that closet is 1,000 times worse than the guy in rubber suit who eventually jumps out. When you're in that thinking phase, your brain is an imagination machine running wild. You're simulating total failure, bankruptcy, social humiliation.
But reality has limits.
Reality is concrete. The moment you take that small, reversible step, the moment you open the closet door, all those infinite, terrifying possibilities collapse into one single truth. And that truth is usually pretty mundane.
The writing was hard, the bread didn't rise.
But it wasn't a world-ending catastrophe. So the argument is that experience replaces speculation. And even a bad experience like, wow, this is much harder than I thought, is less stressful than the vague, free-floating anxiety of what if.
You can deal with a bad draft. You can't fight a phantom.
The source calls it the relief of reality.
So, to bring this home, the text ends by talking about 2 modes of being, thinking mode and testing mode.
And it's careful not to knock thinking mode. You need it for planning, for strategy, but it makes this one crucial distinction. Only testing mode provides new information.
When you're in thinking mode, you're just recycling the same old data, just rearranging the furniture in your head.
Correct. And this is where the concept of gentle direction comes in. The tone here is so important. It doesn't say, force yourself to work.
A drill sergeant.
No. It says, invite yourself to test. It's about orientation, not sales. You shouldn't have to sell yourself on a huge life change. If you have to give yourself a hype speech in the mirror just to take the first step, the step is too big.
That's a fantastic rule of thumb. If you need a hype speech, shrink the step.
Exactly. The transition should feel gentle. It should feel like, I'm just going to try this little thing and see what happens. The text uses this beautiful phrase. You're not choosing a future. You're allowing clarity to arrive.
Allowing clarity to arrive. I love that. It implies the answer is out there waiting for you, but you have to physically move to a different spot to even see it.
You can't think your way to clarity. You have to act your way there.
So let's wrap this all up. We started by validating that hesitation. You're not lazy. You're just smart enough to see the identity risks.
But then we saw how that intelligence can work against you. You hit a point where more research is just procrastination wearing a smart-looking coat.
So the move is to stop trying to commit and start trying to test, using that safe step framework. Small, reversible, and a specific learning goal.
Make it reversible so your identity alarm doesn't go off. Make it small so you don't even need willpower.
And by doing that, you move from the horror movie of the unknown to the, well, the manageable reality of what's in front of you.
You swap speculation for controlled experience.
It's such a liberating way to think about it. I think so many of us walk around carrying the weight of these unmade decisions that, should I start the business or should I write the book? A backpack that we wear every single day.
And it gets heavier the longer you stand still. This lets you just set the bag down for a minute by running a tiny test. You don't have to decide on the destination to take the first step.
So here's the challenge for everyone listening. Think of that one area where you've been stuck in research mode for months or maybe even years.
And don't commit to finishing it. Don't announce it to the world. Don't tell your friends you're becoming something new.
Just design one tiny reversible experiment. Write one paragraph. Sketch one logo. Record 2 minutes of audio on your phone. Do it in private.
And just see if the reality matches the simulation in your head.
Before we sign off, I do want to leave you with one final thought from the source. It's a pretty provocative question.
It really is. We spent this whole deep dive talking about how waiting protects us. But the source asks you, to consider the dark side of that patience. It asks, if waiting no longer protects you, but only postpones clarity, is it possible your patience has actually become a form of self-imposed blindness?
That's heavy.
It is. It forces you to really question your motives.
Yeah.
At what point does preparing just become a decision to not know the truth? Because as long as you're still preparing, the dream is perfect. It's still alive.
Once you test it, you might find out you don't like it.
Or that it's hard. So preparing becomes this way to keep the fantasy safe from reality.
Exactly. Well, on that note, maybe go ruin the fantasy with a little bit of reality this week. I think you'll find it's worth it. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.